So in today's video, I want to give you guys a small update on my freshwater stingrays, as well as talk about what fish we're going to stock the 2,000 gallon aquarium with. Before we begin though, I'd like to make something abundantly clear. This is only a 100 gallon aquarium. It is to serve as a temporary home for my freshwater stingrays, as well as a bit of a grow out before I put them in the much larger aquarium. As you've seen though, I built a 2,000 gallon aquarium for them. These rays are going to get absolutely massive. The male black diamonds are going to get to about 24 inches across, the female to about 30, and the pearl stingray, which is a female, is going to get to 36 to 40 inches across. So not only did these guys get absolutely massive, they produce a massive amount of ammonia due to their unique osmogulatory system that we'll probably talk about in a future video when I do a detailed care video on freshwater stingrays. But they produce more ammonia than any other freshwater fish of comparable size. Plus have a massive appetite and demand pristine water quality. So keep all of this in mind when you plan to keep freshwater stingrays, because you're going to have to deal with this for the next 20 to 25 years of their lives. So with that warning out of the way, let's talk about how awesome these guys are. To bring you guys up to speed though, I've had these guys for about 6 months though. If you've been following me on YouTube for any amount of time, I've been keeping freshwater stingrays for about 8 or 9 years now, but these guys are the most recent ones that I've gotten. We've got 3 black diamond stingrays. There's 2 females and 1 male, and then we have a pearl stingray, which was never in the plans, but it was a rescue, and all of these fish are doing really well now. Clearly they've put on a lot of size. The pearl has healed completely and has fattened up. The black diamonds have actually caught up in size to a certain extent, but you know, in this aquarium, only being a 100 gallon grow out with freshwater stingrays means that I have to do a lot of water changes. When I first got them and acclimating them to the conditions in this tank, I was doing about 50 to 75% water changes every single day. Now I do about 50% every other day, every 2 to 3 days, which keeps ammonia levels out of the tank. The filters are always cycled, of course, but nitrate levels are extremely low as well, usually undetectable. So taking care of a grow out tank and a bare tank like this is extremely simple, but the focus is always on water quality. However, when it comes to their diet, I typically feed my freshwater stingrays, as well as the bigger fish like the Asian arowana, my homemade do-it-yourself food. But because I've been so busy out in the gallery as of late, and it seems as though every waking minute is spent out there working on something, I haven't had a tremendous amount of time to make any of my do-it-yourself foods. And when I don't have food prepared for them, what I'll typically do is just feed them some of the ingredients that I typically put in that do-it-yourself food. These are all fresh ingredients for the most part. Sometimes they're frozen, but they are never cooked. The texture is everything with rays. For example, I find that rays will not eat cooked shrimp. Perhaps if they're extremely hungry, but for the most part, they'll mouth it and spit it out. Texture and taste is as important to them as it is to us. Out of all the ingredients I put in my food, one of the questions I get is on the shrimp itself. Should it be cooked? Should it be frozen? How do you cut it up? How do you prepare it? And so forth. And like I said, this is raw shrimp. It's never been cooked. However, it has been devined, which means that basically its internal intestinal tract on its back has been removed. Its head's been removed as well. These come frozen, and they come in a variety of different sizes. This is a Pacific white shrimp, which tends to be a little bit bigger than your average shrimp that you would consume. I just get these at my grocery store and I wait until they go on sale and I buy them in bulk. They do come frozen, however, so what I like to do is put them in a little container of room temperature water and let them defrost that way. It actually helps them defrost much more quicker. Once defrosted though, it's extremely easy to remove the shell. Simply hold on to the front end of the shrimp and pull off the tail. We want to pull off the shell for a couple of reasons. One, they don't have the ability to digest it, even though there's a lot of calcium in this and it's technically kind of healthy, but the tails are actually sharp and can do some damage. However, in a captive environment, you want to remove potential threats. Once you remove the tail, there's still a little bit of the shell left on the front end. Again, these just come right off if they're fully defrosted. Now, depending on the size of the shrimp, you will need to cut it up. For a big rays, you could just feed this whole, throw it in, it'll be fine. But this is going to come down to the size of the ray, and in my opinion, you want to pay attention to the size of their mouth and make sure the food can actually fit inside of it. For these larger size shrimp, I like to cut them directly in half right down their back. This gives me 2 halves. From there, I'll go ahead and cut it up into much smaller pieces that I know can actually fit into their mouth. It kind of looks like this. The other ingredients in my do-it-yourself food are much easier to prepare. There's much less steps. All you have to do is chop it up and include it. So again, cut it right down the center, and even something like this makes the shrimp a little bit more flimsy, and it's actually pretty good for larger predators. When you're dropping it into the tank, it can actually look like a fish. And I've even shown you guys how to trick your fish into eating shrimp as opposed to live fish by tying a bit of sewing thread to it and floating it through the tank, kind of jerking it through the water column and giving it the appearance of a fish, and they will eat it. But of course, one of the key factors with keeping rays, and half the battle, is making sure they eat and they're on a good diet. When feeding them the shrimp though, what I like to do is add a little bit of tank water to the shrimp, simply because the shrimp tends to stick together sometimes and clump together. So if I were to just dump that in there, it's probably just gonna all clump up at the bottom and one ray is gonna get most of the meal. But if I separate it with a little bit of water and then pour it in throughout the entire aquarium, keeping it all distributed evenly, it ensures everybody gets a little something. And that's pretty important with freshwater stingrays, because not all species of rays are as aggressive eaters as others. Again, I'd like to do a detailed care video for freshwater stingrays, and if that's something you guys like to see, I'll make sure I get to work on it when the gallery is completed. Other than that, I mean, there's not a whole lot else I can update here. The rays are doing fine, they're healthy and happy, they're not fighting, they're eating enough, they've put on weight and size, but you know, ultimately, I'll be 100% honest, I have not spent a lot of time down in the office as of late, and I truly miss being surrounded by my fish, but that is all about to change very soon. Because as many of you guys know, their 2,000 gallon aquarium is now completed. In fact, this week, I also finished the plumbing as well as filtration. This thing is ready to be filled with water. I'm going to do the first test fill next week, most likely on Monday or Tuesday. And then I'll water test it and have it filled with water for about a week. From there, a lot of people are asking me, how am I going to cycle this aquarium? How long is it going to take? Is that going to be added even more time to the wait? And the simple answer is no. I'm going to be using 100% cycled media already. The fluidized filter, for example, is going to house, you know, a little over 100 liters of media, and I already have that already cycled. It's actually on the Asian Arowana tank. Okay, so what about stocking though? That's a question that everybody wants to know. What are you putting in this tank? And as many of you guys know, I'm first going to scape the aquarium with that Malaysian wood. The wood's still kind of soaking out here in the sun. I have noticed that I've had to start changing the water a little bit more often because the water's warming up and it's still releasing tannins, but we still have a couple more weeks to let this release, and by then tannins should be very minimal in the tank. And to some, tannins aren't a bad thing, and it can make the tank look more natural and look really good. And I do prefer it for some tanks, I just don't want it in this tank. I want the water crystal clear, and I want my Asian Arowana to look like a dragon just kind of gliding through the air. I'm probably going to scape the aquarium first with that wood like I've shown you guys before, and then I'm going to figure out lighting and plants later on. The timing, this thing is just moving way faster than I had anticipated, and so we're just going to take it as it comes. Worst case scenario, I jump in the tank in order to add the plants onto the wood. Not a big deal. So the surface area of this aquarium is about 70 square feet. Very big tank, but the wood is going to take up a little bit of space within the aquarium, meaning that the open swimming area is not going to be as big as this looks. Clearly the scape is, like I said, going to take up some of that area. As for initial stocking, you guys know that my blue base crossback Asian Arowana and those 4 freshwater stingrays are going to be added to this aquarium. And I don't want those rays to kind of fool you in terms of those tiny little rays being put in this really big aquarium, because those rays, like I said, are going to become absolutely massive. And just their surface area of those 4 rays at an adult size are going to take up 50% of the entire surface area of the tank. Then the Asian Arowana, which is only about, I don't know, 22, 24 inches long at this time, is not even really half grown. It's only got about another 6 to 8 inches in length to go, but it has to put on a lot more width and height. So this fish is almost gonna double in size. I've gone to public aquariums where they had adult Asian Arowana, and they were absolutely massive, you know, 3-4 inches thick, 6-8 inches tall, and you know, that 30 inches long, just absolute beasts. So if I were to tell you that I'm only going to stock the 4 freshwater stingrays and Asian arowana, you'd be like, oh, wow, such a waste, such little fish in such a big tank. But if I showed you these guys at absolute maximum size put in this aquarium, it would make much more sense. So as for future stocking, some of the fish that I'm thinking about is perhaps I will add a couple of more freshwater stingrays. I'll have to really consider that over the next few months, but the initial stocking will of course only be the 4 freshwater stingrays as well as the Asian arowana. We'll get them established and then potentially look into other fish. But some other fish I was thinking about were bashirs or bikers, however you want to pronounce that. I was thinking about some midwater swimmers, and since I'm going to have plants in here, I have to be very cautious with, you know, a lot of the fish I was potentially thinking. I was thinking maybe some of the smaller species of gar, maybe I do something as simple as a nice big school of tinfoil barbs, which those fish get, you know, 10, 12 inches big, so those big fish would look great in this tank. Bottom line is though, the rays are probably not going to eat or attack any fish. They're a curious creature, but they're not a predator in terms of attacking and eating everything in the tank. If you keep them fed, they're happy. Worst case scenario, what they might do is pin a fish up to the side of the acrylic and, you know, mouth it, taste it, and see what it is and explore. Again, they're a very curious creature. I've seen them do that with big Oscars and Severums in the past. They kind of suction cup them to the side and, you know, taste them. You know, sometimes with discus, they'll bite their heads off or, you know, crush their heads. So discus are touch and go tank mates with stingrays, but most other fish that are pretty quick moving are totally fine. As for the Asian arowana, since he's so big though, I have to get fish that he can't fit in his mouth, because if he could fit them in his mouth, he is going to eat them, and he will make it a point to eat them. So, you know, stocking options are, you know, tremendous in this aquarium, but we also have to consider the fish that are currently going to be going into it, as well as their size. So I'm in a bit of a predicament. I do want to hear your guys' feedback on what you think would look good in this tank and what you think might even be compatible. I do listen to you guys, and often I take your recommendations. But ultimately, I'm really the type that truly needs to set the aquarium up, get the initial stocking in, see the scape, and, you know, kind of go from there and get a feel for it. But to summarize, we'll start out with the fish that I currently have, and we'll go from there. So that was a bit of an update on the stingrays, as well as, you know, a discussion on the 2,000-gallon aquarium stocking. I'll admit a lot of the times I like to show you these things because I enjoy the feedback I get and all of the ideas and even the inspiration I get from you guys. So I appreciate all of the interaction you guys have with me. I truly enjoy it and look forward to everything you guys have to say in the comment section below. So if you have any feedback, of course, just let me know. Next week, or this coming Sunday, I will show you everything that I've accomplished out in the gallery. The filtration is completed, as well as all of the plumbing and a few other little things that I'm excited to show you. Followed by next week, we're going to fill that 2,000-gallon aquarium for the first time, water test it, and get these bad boys outside into that tank, and finally move on to some other aquariums. Once we free up this 375-gallon tank, that's going out there, and we're turning that into a planted tank. And so forth. So much more is happening next week and the weeks to follow. I'm really excited and, you know, truly grateful for you guys being so interested and following me along with this journey. And I'm definitely enjoying, you know, sharing it with you. So I hope that you guys enjoyed today's video. I'd also like to thank you for watching. And if you join me this coming Sunday, I will have a pretty interesting update on the aquarium gallery.